Welcome back to the Truth Over Comfort show. On the last video, we covered the relationship between the British establishment and oil firms in government, military, and intelligence. A lot of people going to BP and Shell. The last three heads of MI6 all went to an oil firm, which is pretty interesting. And people coming from BP and Shell going into government or sitting on advisory boards, like currently the post economic recovery for Boris Johnson, or soon not to be. Bernard Looney, the head of BP, David Cameron's government, Bob Dudley, head of BP, also on the advisory board there, all just swimming around the government like the revolving door in America with arms corporations. I'm sure they have oil, and I'm sure we have arms too. But it was a great article by Declassified UK. I didn't read the article, I just took the links and showed you some interesting things. There were a few people as well swimming around at the time of the Iraq invasion who might have been influential for the BP getting a drilling deal in Iraq and then eventually sitting on their boards. May just be a coincidence, circumstantial, or just they hire them for networking. I'm not going to say it's either one. It could be a bit of both, but it's just interesting to see how many people do end up at these oil firms, not always BP and Shell. But in this video, we are going to be doing something completely different. We are going to be, I'm again not going to be reading through the article. I obviously read it and taken the links out of it that I need to talk about. It is by Ben Norton at the Grey Zone, who's now at Multipolista. We covered him before on the Liz Truss video. The article is how elite US institutions created Afghanistan's neoliberal president Ashraf Ghani, who stole $169 million from his country. I'm not covering the money part because there's lots of reports and it's not what I'm looking at today. But he was the president of Afghanistan from 2014 until they fell in 2021. Obviously, I'm a bit late to the game with this article, but I thought it'd be good to do a video on Afghanistan. And this stuck out to me because, especially a country like Afghanistan, where the Taliban, the locals in the villages are pretty traditional to their culture and what they do. It's not like Dubai or the UAE where they're more flashy and trying to attack tourists. They are, just continuing their culture. They just do their day-to-day things. So having a president like Ashraf Ghani, who spent a lot of time in America studying at university, being a professor, working at the World Bank, then his relationship with think tanks like the Atlantic Council, which is basically the mouth of NATO that is funded by governments, arms corporations, oil banks, all the normal bits. A massive think tank that's had people like Rupert Murdoch, obviously the head of News Corporation. So back in the day when it hit his all his empire, Fox, Sky, The Sun, The Times, maybe even the Wall Street Journal. I'm sure I'm missing a few things, and local papers I've never heard of. Zbigniew Brzezinski, who is actually part of funding the Mujahideen and getting the operation going with Jimmy Carter against the Soviets in Afghanistan way back in the day. And I'll get up their board when Ashraf Ghani was actually part of this board, and that's all in the Atlantic Council's words. None of this is pretty much all from the horse's mouth. So just for an Afghanistan president who's been abroad for so many years, held US citizenship and gave it up to run in 2014, who's like this, the World Bank is one of obviously the biggest Western capitalist institutions you can. Not very Afghani, is it really? When he went back, he put on the right clothing to try and appeal back to them. And there was at the time, 2014, loads of reports of fraud, EU confirming it. I'm not really going to this. You can, I'll put the links in the description. So not really the most authentic Afghan you'd want, really. It'd be like an Afghan coming to this country and, in his cultured way and wanting to scrap capitalism and everything to do with it and go back to just traditional things. Most people, they could put a suit on all they want, they'd look out of place. So it's kind of the other way around, if that helps you think about it. So just to get started, I'm not going to read the article like I said, but obviously credit to Ben Norton because I've read it and taken all the links from there, so all the credit should go to him. He's also got a video on it if you'd prefer him to speak about it. But so he studied. He is from Afghanistan, although he spent a lot of his time in America and basically was made in a Western US lab before being shipped off to Afghanistan to become the president and try and put in some of these policies. He even wrote a book called "Fixing Failed States" with someone else who used to work for the World Bank, and they both set up a think tank together about state effectiveness. You can't make this up. Like, the guy wrote a book about fixing failed states and then becomes president of this failed state because obviously it's been bombed and been at war for 40 years. But I'm sure they'd still consider it a failed state until it's sort of capitalist and privatized. But he's done TED Talks, talk at Google. He's constantly at the Atlantic Council through the years before and after, and obviously NATO summits, which makes sense because of NATO's run Afghanistan. But it's just, he has been made in a lab and cloned for the characteristics and groomed, sort of like some president leaders from the Gulf countries go to like elite military British military universities, colleges, whatever you call it, like Sandhurst, where they're sort of groomed for the role. And the links between the West and them that then implement. So, but he is from Afghanistan. He does anthropology and Afghan studies, professor at Kabul University in Afghanistan. This is CNN, actually. Just, they're quite good. Well, not just CNN, BBC, anyone. They're good at profiles of people. This is before obviously Afghanistan fell. He comes to the United States to study anthropology at Columbia University in 1977. So that's, a pretty elite university. He then becomes a professor at Berkeley. So he's now been there 6 years, becomes a professor. And then he professes anthropology at Johns Hopkins University, another quite elite university in the US. So from 1977 to 1991, it's just in America doing anthropology, studying it and professing there, which is interesting. He then, for 10 more years, was at the World Bank. So for 24 years, he's just in America. I think he was born in 1949. So, a lot of his life he's just in America, studying at our universities in our Western way rather than more traditional Afghan. I don't know if they go to university in Afghanistan. I'm sure they don't. I'm sure they just stay local, doing their goat herding, farming, or traditional practices. So the World Bank is basically as Western as you can get. It's the arm of obviously the capitalist countries, and I'm sure a local Afghan is not looking for, because in the West everything is obviously privatized. You're not a lot of maybe some African, Middle Eastern countries, South American, they nationalize their own resources because they don't want it to be privatized and go to private corporations for the profits. They want the people to get the profits, or maybe they just want to take it all themselves. Depends on the leader, I'm sure. But in the West, obviously everything is private. Our water services are private, our electric, our gas, everything is a corporation that the profits go to them, and the World Bank encourages policies like that, privatization. And we get to a thing later where the IMF, which is so normally the World Bank, the US will appoint the leader, and then the IMF, it'd be European countries. They talk about Afghanistan being open for business at the Atlantic Council, which is interesting. So as a local Afghan, you're not looking for some leader to come in, privatize everything, build up the resources where, they have a lot of minerals that are probably untapped because they don't have the facilities. And I'm sure they eventually want a government stable enough to reap the profits back to the people. You get a leader who obviously is practiced in the West, they're going to privatize all of that, and it's going to be encouraged, by the World Bank and the IMF. And then it's going to go to, Western corporations. So definitely not what they're looking like. So he returns to post-Taliban Afghanistan to be the special advisor. to I'm gonna butcher all these names. Lakhada Brahimi, the United Nations Special Envoy, and then he interestingly becomes the Afghan Finance Minister in the transitional government led by Hamid Karzai. I should get that. It's easy. So he's worked at the World Bank, and all these universities, learning Western US economics. He then becomes the finance minister, so that's obviously directly tied to that by the government put in by the West, Hamid Karzai, which is interesting. So I'm gonna just stop for there. This is Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. This is the United States Department of State, and just to see Ashraf Ghani, Afghanistan president, 2014 to present, not anymore. He did this program in 1985. Not again. This is just his profile from Columbia University, which I'm not. Did he? Yeah, he did anthropology there. So, and again, it talks about his time at the World Bank. This next bit. So I'm not going to play any of this, but he did a TED talk. Again, you don't see many Pashtun or actually, any Afghan in their traditional wear come over here and do a TED talk that goes on YouTube, technological devices that we can all watch in the West. That's not very Afghan or relatable to their day-to-day, worries and struggles and just activities, really. So this was in 2005. How to rebuild a broken state, which I guess foreshadows his eventual writing of a book with another ex-World Bank British, ex-Oxford University student, which again is just pretty nuts. That he actually went on to win, or fraudulently won. He, as I said before, he put on all the right, clothes and stuff to start looking a bit more like a local and not been living in the West and doing speeches about rebuilding a state, and then suddenly he's now the leader to rebuild this state. Oh, that's just what coincidence. I wonder all the people who grow up and I just want to rebuild all these third world, states and bring them up to like the West and, help everyone. And then magic, bang, they become a leader at a country to do that. There's got to be some fraud, not just even the ballot, just like getting pushed in the media. I mean, you can see later all the articles. I'm not going to read through them. There's headline after headline. He's a technocrat. Technocrat is like someone who's in the UN, the EU, or tech companies or anything like that. Not a traditional Afghan. Again, like it's strange they'd even want to call him a technocrat. It's strange. I'm not going to play the clip, but again, so he sets up. Let's go back here. He sets up the Institute for State Effectiveness. Again, when did he set that up? Well, 2006. So that's after his speech. They set this up. The Institute for State Effectiveness, ISE, stems from decades of cutting-edge work implementing change in country, the study of best practices, and leading policy transformational in global organizations. The roots of ISE's work are in World Bank programs in the late 1990s, which Ashraf Ghani, of course, was working in the World Bank in the 1990s, which aimed to improve countries' strategies and program implementation. It focused on building coalitions for reform, implementing large-scale policies, and training the next generation of development professionals to read country context and collaborate with local actors. So like how he was being trained to be the next generation of politicians in Afghanistan to bring it towards the West. Interesting that. So just to show you, he set it up. So in 2011, ISE co-founder Dr. Anthropology Ashraf Ghani returned to his homeland, Afghanistan, to lead the Afghan traditional team, and in January 2013 stepped down from ISE prior to his election in 2014 as president of Afghanistan, and also got rid of his US citizenship to not look like a complete puppet. Claire Lockhart has continued to expand ISEs, so she is the person who wrote the book with him and used to work for the World Bank. I'll pull up her profile in a bit. So this is interesting as well. So not only is he from, from the West, and as a fellow, if he's grown up in Afghanistan, he has some heritage there, some understanding of the West, the mindset of people local there who probably hate the West for constantly trying to interfere in elections, their policies, telling them this is how you got to do it, this is how you'll be happy, even though obviously the West, mental illness, depression, suicides through the roof. Come join us. I'm not saying it's all because of capitalism. I'm not against that, but we ain't perfect. But you'd at least see, the 80s, the Soviets invaded, but the CIA and the US just want to prolong it and give them their Vietnam. They want a quagmire that lasts ages and kills millions or hundreds of thousands of people. That's not looking out. We're funding this other side because we want to, for human rights and the government. No, you want to prolong it, which murders more people, or proxy war, a bit like the Ukraine-Russia thing. They're pumping a lot of money in there. But you'd see all that, the Gulf War. Can they just stop meddling? But no, this guy loves NATO. He wants more meddling. Let's just find it. Where is it? Ooh. 4 roles for Europe. So this is an ISE. I think it's a speech he did to the European Ideas Networks Conference in Lisbon. How lovely, in 2005. 4 roles for Europe. Today, there is only a fragile consensus around both democracy and capitalism. Whilst this consensus has to come about after around 200 years of debate, it still needs to be consolidated. And let's just make this a bit bigger for you, so you can read it on that phone if you care. The best route to consolidation is along the path of inclusion. Here it can be positioned as a global catalyst and mediator with 4 roles to play. We're not going to go through 4. The first is to interject new vitality into NATO, the World Bank, the UN, and regional organizations. NATO took its first mission outside Europe in my country, Afghanistan. This is an incredibly important departure. It must become part of a global effort. But the World Bank, the UN, and other multilateral organizations await revitalization. He wants more. He's like, NATO is only involved in the Cold War in Europe. Obviously, they did a lot of meddling outside that, or the US and the UK and whoever else. But he wants more. He's happy that, I'm so glad they're finally taking the mission out to Europe, to my country. And this is like 4 years in. It's not even like right at the start where, even maybe some Afghanistan people are like, finally, we hate the Taliban. This could be, breath of fresh air. No. Bombs. Fresh bombs, my friend. Nah. He wants more. And this is before, he was the finance minister. And he's saying, we want more NATO. We want more, look how this was important. What he said, this is an incredibly important departure. You just can't wait. We need more meddling in the Middle East, more chaos. He wants more World Bank, more UN, all these internationalist, non-sovereign organizations. That's not, again, what the local Afghan wants. I am assuming. I am assuming, of course, but I don't see them loving all these internationalist Western bent. It's not like the UN. Yeah, the World Bank's clearly Western bent, but the UN, it always takes, the African nations and, third world countries. They do not get the same voice. The fact there's still a Security Council because of because of World War II, fighting for empires. Then the US, France, Britain, China, and Russia can veto stuff for their own benefit because of World War II. Like, the UN is not a fair organization, and the African stuff do not get a voice, and Afghanistan does not get a voice. He wants more. He's nuts. What great sales pitch to Afghanistan. And we want more of, meddling in the Middle East, bombs, World Bank, Western policies. It's all good. Oh, and this who funds that think tank. The Australian government, Carnegie Corporation, G7, that was great. German Marshall Fund, Canada, the government of Canada, and Norwegian Open Society Funds, George Soros, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Royal Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Netherlands, UK Department of International Development, and the World Bank Group. Not many Asian things there, is there? There's a lot of Western think foundations, governments, G7. Where's anything from the Middle East? Yeah, they didn't even get Saudi Arabia. Have they got? Did I see Kuwait? I don't think so. They got nothing from Asia really. Maybe one thing. Someone probably could pick it out. I can't. All these Western funded stuff to his think tank that he set up. I wonder what they sort of policies they like his policies, which is capitalism and privatization. Nothing wrong with a bit of privatization, but if I was an Afghan citizen, I wouldn't want my natural resources that could go back to us being privatized to these corporations outside of our control, in even Afghanistan ones, or especially foreign ones. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. Can't wait. This is their book. It's on Amazon. If you want to give it a read, I don't know who's read it, but he got loads. Goldman Sachs person, all these different people from banks and internationalist Western sort of organizations, banks, saying how great this book is at the start. Again, Claire Lockhart, but Fixing Failed States, a framework for rebuilding a fractured world. It's a meme. He wrote a book about fixing states, and then he's actually got the job to do it. Nuts. Absolutely nuts. So this is Claire Lockhart's profile. Claire Lockhart is on the World Bank's website. Old website. Co-founder and director of the Institute for State Effectiveness, was named among the 100 most influential global thinkers by foreign policy, along with Ashraf Ghani in 2009 and 2010 for her work on fragile states. From 2001 through 2005, Claire was a UN advisor to the Bonn Agreement in Afghanistan, great, and then was seconded to the Afghan government. Subsequently, she's been called on to advise NATO, ISAF, and the US government on a range of global issues. And Miss Lockhart managed a program on institution strategy at the World Bank. That's probably really small. I just realized. All the links in the description. I'm sure you don't think I'm lying about reading about this World Bank thing. So then, great, they're together at Google with Google. Ooh. Ashraf Ghani and Claire Lockhart, Fixing Failed States, talks at Google, 2008, June. Interesting. Now, they wrote the book. Now they're presenting it at one of the biggest Western corporations in the world to the Western audience, obviously, who know the new generation. Always fun. Oh, this is his Twitter. So again, this is an insight from Ben Norton's article. Don't want to take that away from him. Who does he follow? He's got 1 million followers. Pretty impressive. He's following 14 people. Just look at who he's following, and what does that tell us? Oh, sorry, Abdullah. So basically, about the election for 2014, there was a squabble. John Kerry had to fly over there. He was in the Obama administration, Secretary of State, and the squabble was between who won between them two. So they gave him not like a vice president, chief executive officer, CEO. So that's just how Western. He speaks about just how neoliberal their policies is, which is like privatizing and free market stuff. And yeah, he's the CEO of a country. Like, they weren't like, surely they're not even trying. Like, if you're gonna like put in a puppet, you want to make him not look like a puppet. You don't want to see the strings. But apparently they're like, let's just call him CEO. Yeah, that's not Western. So I don't know who some of these people are. Fareed Zakaria, host of CNN, which is interesting. I think he's probably done an interview. Follows NATO, the Atlantic Council, the Munich Security Conference, and Jens Stoltenberg, the head of NATO. So of all the 14 people he follows, there's a few others in there. Prime Minister of India, which was because the Indians was funding the opposition there against Pakistan, because the Pakistanis allied with the Taliban. But he follows, good few Western things. He could have just not followed him. Like, you got 14 followers, following. Do you really need to? Again, it just displays where his loyalties are. Or not his loyalty, just his ideology. So this is an interview at the Atlantic Council in 2009. Again, he's not president yet. Frederick Kemp, who is the head of the Atlantic Council, and they're talking about how they've been friends since they was 2003. Ashraf and I met, when was it, in 2003, 2003? Yeah, when you came with Zbigniew Jones, I think. But they've known each other for quite a while. Again, at the Atlantic Council, Afghanistan report, a 10-year framework for the future. The Atlantic Council of the United States, a 10-year framework for Afghanistan, executing the Obama plan and beyond. A report by the Atlantic Council, Ashraf Ghani. So he wrote a report for the Atlantic Council about a 10-year framework before he's even elected for Obama, basically, or executing the Obama plan, which I think they talk about that they came up with. Let me just check that. Let's see if it comes up here. Oh, actually, I just realized. Yeah, there's a bit about it here. So let's just quickly get to that bit. So this is Frederick Kemp. When I came to the Atlantic Council 2 years ago and a couple months ago, we built an international advisory board of sitting chairmen and CEOs of globally significant companies, cabinet members, former cabinet members, and some of the key, renowned, known countries. At that point, it wasn't so much I was determined to Afghanistan represented on the International Advisory Board, because not all countries in South Asia are. Yeah. But I was determined to have Ashraf Ghani because he's a person who understands the world, understands his region, understands his country. This is the time I want to thank two members of the Strategic Advisors Group. Ashraf Ghani is on the International Advisory Board, which is a group of these businessmen and politicians I told you about. He is also a member of the Strategic Advisors Group. This is actually a working group of the Atlantic Council. It was co-chaired by Zbigniew Jones. He was one of the co-chairs until he took his new job and left as the chairman of the Atlantic Council. Zbigniew Jones, actual Zbigniew? I'm guessing so. Where are we? At that point, we came up with the idea that there had to be a 10-year framework for Afghanistan. Little did we know that we were developing and implementing a strategy, because it was always thought to be an implementing strategy. But suddenly we had an Obama plan behind it, which is behind which to put this implementing strategy. And if you'll see in the report, they fit pretty well. I don't know if they're saying there that they've written a 10-year plan for Obama. But so he's on these two boards for the Atlantic Council, swear around, as he said, with these CEOs of massive corporations, cabinet members of governments all around the world, and ex-cabinet members. That is crazy. Again, this is about this is the thing they wrote. They're speaking about the other one. And this is just in the media. So the Financial Times, Ashraf Ghani, the technocratic candidate, again, at the Atlantic Council in 2009. A conversation with Afghanistan presenter, so he's still a candidate at this point. Again, promoting, and they want him obviously to win. And this was the International Advisory Board they're talking about. So you got Brent Scrowshaft, who is National Security Advisor to former presidents Gerald Ford, George H.W. Bush, Frederick Kemp, obviously the head of the Atlantic Council. So you got here former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Spain, Zbigniew Brzezinski, National Security Advisor to President Jimmy Carter. Who else do I know here? Ashraf Ghani, of course. Chairman and CEO of Lockheed Martin, the biggest arms corporation in the world, from America. Oil. CEO of Coca-Cola. Because when you think of Coca-Cola, I think of the drink, but it's a money-making machine, of course, and part of corporate interests overseas. Obviously, Coca-Cola's everywhere, isn't it? Probably wants to get in to Afghanistan, I'm sure. Former president of Poland, Rupert Murdoch, the chairman and CEO of News Corporation, Gordon Nixon, Royal Bank of Canada, Unilever CEO, Lord Robertson, former Secretary General of NATO, we spoke about in the last video, Thomas Reuters, CEO, no, loads, just loads and loads and loads, and he's there with them on this board. That's crazy, before he becomes Afghanistan's president. So again, New York Times, technocrat to Afghan populist, Ashraf Ghani is transformed. Whatever that means. Who is Ashraf Ghani? The technocrat who sought to rebuild Afghanistan, BBC. The New Yorker, Afghanistan, the theorist in chief. Oh, and here he is. In March, Madeleine Albright presented Ashraf Ghani with his award. So he won an award. I can't remember what it's for. Madeleine Albright is in the Clinton administration, and you can see the video. I put it in the show notes of her getting asked about were the sanctions on Iraq worth killing 500,000 children. She says, yes, we think it was worth it. So he is with her at the Atlantic Council. She presents him an award. You're from Afghanistan, and you know, they don't see the borders the same way we do. They see, sort of, especially the Gulf and Persia. They're just Arabia. It's just, the West, imperialism, empires wrote these borders. They're, one people. And someone says it was fine, which was worth it to kill 500,000 children from sanctions. And now he's happy to take a award for it. You should hate her guts. Nope. Again, Atlantic Council, the awards, he's in there. See if we can see him. Where are you hiding? Oh, I can't see it. Again, IMF. Ghani has shown Afghanistan is open for business. What was the bit? Afghanistan is also rich in mineral resources, but to fully exploit them, the country needs a business climate that encourages foreign companies to invest heavily in infrastructure that allows these companies to transport their products cheaply from mines to world markets. So right there, they're saying you need to make your regulations more suitable and wanted by foreign companies, so we can come and invest, prioritize your resources, and transport them cheaply to world markets and reap the benefits. I mean, in fact, to fully exploit them is a strange use of word, because exploit isn't really. It sounds a bit imperialist, doesn't it? Rather than to help the country. You need some foreign investment because you don't have the infrastructure. We'll come over, we'll help you, and then we train you how to do it, and then we'll leave. No, we're not going to train you how to do it. We want to be there forever, and you can't be independent, and we want to exploit them. That's really what it is. Again, at NATO, and we're back to here about the fraud website. So I think I'll leave it there. Check out Ben Norton's article, because it puts in obviously a much more contextual and narrative based article that goes into, he has much more knowledge on this me. But it doesn't take anyone to know much about the subject to see that an Afghan presidential candidate who wrote a book about failed states, worked at the World Bank, swimming around all these, corporate Western CEOs, government officials, sets up a think tank, is funded by these same people he's swimming around with. Doesn't take much research into that to understand. He's been shipped from the West in a lab, and he's gone there to do one thing, to open up the economy to these companies that treat him so well and promoting him, because of course the media is obviously part of promoting him too, and a lot of the big newspapers, their main shareholders are the same shareholders in these companies, etc., etc. But I think I'll leave it there today. Obviously, there's a lot of talking, but you might not have found that as interesting as some. But I think it's pretty remarkable that, I mean, it shows, how remarkable it is the fact that he had to start wearing the clothes when he became it, so he didn't look like he'd just been shipped in from the West. So that's pretty telling that they, for PR, they thought we need the people to actually like you too. You can't just, get, once you're there, they need to like you. So I'll leave it there. I'll put all the links in the show notes. Check out my website. I'll be going there at some point, and the YouTube. If you liked it, like it, share it, and I'll see you next time.